Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio, and the intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey. And and hopefully you all can hear me. So, how you doing, Scott? Good to see you. Hey, Joe. Good to see you as well. How you doing, Logan? Good to see you as well. Hopefully you all can hear me. I'm just going to, before I kind of get started on our official programming, I'm just going to wait for confirmation on that because all my instruments might be saying that I am firing on all cylinders, but sometimes I'm just not because something isn't working. So if someone could just confirm in the chat that they can hear me, then I'll get started on today's programming. All right, good. We got sound. All right. We're good to go. All right. Green to green. All right. So today, what we're going to focus on is we're going to look at a little bit of multiverse theory, mainly from Hugh Everett's Many Worlds interpretation, and, as it relates to quantum mechanics. And then as like through that speculation, how that might relate to some otherwise intelligent species punching through to our reality from a parallel universe. Like how would they do it within the realm of conceptualized physics? I want to just give everybody a clear warning. I had ChatGPT do a deep research project on this, so if I get anything wrong, for if somebody's a legit physicist, I will defer entirely to you. This is for entertainment. This is not an education channel. So just be advised. In fact, I don't even know what this is going to say because I'm a pretty busy person and I just kind of throw in something I want to talk about and then I just let ChatGPT do its magic and we'll see how it goes. How you doing this year? All right. So with that, let's get started. Okay. So many worlds interpretation, parallel universes, and crossing between realities. So, quantum mechanics, the physics of atoms and subatomic particles, famously defies our common sense intuitions. In the quantum realm, a particle can exist in a superposition of multiple states at once, like being in two places simultaneously, until we observe it. The big mystery, known as the quantum measurement problem, is how our single definite reality emerges from this ghostly multitude of possibilities and probabilities. In 1957, physicist Hugh Everett III proposed a radical answer now called the many worlds interpretation, or MWI, of quantum mechanics. According to MWI, whenever a quantum event has multiple possible outcomes, the universe actually splits into parallel branches so that every outcome actually occurs, each in its own world. This idea suggests a cosmic reality composed of countless parallel universes existing alongside our own. On this show, we'll explore how the many worlds theory works, what it means for the existence of parallel universes, and consider speculative mechanisms by which an intelligence from another such universe might, in principle, cross into ours. We will also weave in perspectives from key physicists such as Albert Einstein, Hugh Everett, John Wheeler, Niels Bohr, Wolfgang Pauli, and others, and discuss insights from general relativity, string theory, metaphysics, and consciousness studies. Finally, we'll examine the philosophical implications of this multiverse picture and potential real world consequences of believing we inhabit one of many worlds. All right, so we're going to start all the way back with quantum mechanics and the puzzle of observation. So, to understand Everett's breakthrough, we first need the context of the quantum measurement puzzle that troubled the founding generation of physicists, or basically quantum physicists. Quantum theory uses a mathematical object called the wave function to describe a system state, this essentially encoding all possible configurations of the system along with their probabilities. In other words, it's just a probability distribution. Okay, so think of like a bell curve, only where an electron ends up won't necessarily be a bell curve. It depends on how that system is configured. But just think of, you have a range of, outcomes on the bottom axis, and then kind of the y-axis would be the probability of that outcome. Okay, and according to Hugh Everett's many worlds theory, all those outcomes happen. It's just each time they happen, it just ties off, and you go into another universe is born, basically. All right. So, for example, an electron might have a wave function that says it could be in multiple places or spinning in different directions at once. The wave function evolves smoothly and deterministically according to the Schrödinger equation, meaning the quantum state changes over time in a definite law-like way. However, when we measure the system, say detect the electron's position, we never see a spread out superposition of many outcomes. We see one definite result, one position, one spin. It's as if nature chooses a single outcome at the moment of observation, and the other possibilities vanish, collapse. Standard quantum theory handles this by adding a special rule. The wave function collapses upon measurement, randomly picking one of the superimposed options according to its probability. The collapse is abrupt and not described by the Schrödinger equation. It has to be put in by hand as an extra postulate, which breaks the normal deterministic evolution. The weird divide between a fuzzy quantum world and a single classical outcome bothered many physicists. Albert Einstein was deeply uneasy with the idea of genuine randomness and the apparent, quote-unquote, spooky, instantaneous change involved in wave function collapse. God does not play dice with the universe, Einstein famously quipped, expressing his belief that underlying physical reality should be orderly and deterministic rather than probabilistic. Einstein, with colleague Podolsky and Rosen, formulated the EPR paradox in 1935, arguing that quantum mechanics, as usually interpreted, seemed incomplete or non-local, involving faster-than-light effects. Niels Bohr, the leading advocate of the Copenhagen interpretation, took a different philosophical tack. He accepted that we cannot talk about any definite reality underneath the quantum math until a measurement occurs. Bohr insisted that quantum mechanics only yields probabilities for observed outcomes, and it's wrong to think that the task of physics is to find out how nature is. Physics concerns what we can say about nature, as he and Wolfgang Pauli often emphasized. In Bohr's view, asking what's really happening before an observation, for example, is the cat alive or dead before I look, is meaningless. The pragmatic stance, shut up and calculate, as if it's sometimes glossed, dominated mid-20th century physics, but it left the reality of the quantum world somewhat mysterious. Enter Hugh Everett. As a Princeton graduate student in the mid-1950s, Everett grew dissatisfied with the collapse postulate. Why should an observation suddenly break the laws of quantum evolution? Could the measuring device and observer themselves be treated as quantum systems without invoking a magical collapse? In his 1957 PhD thesis, aptly titled The Theory of Universal Wave Function, Everett answered yes. He proposed that the wave function of the entire universe, including observers, always evolves smoothly and never collapses. The catch is that this leads to the counterintuitive conclusion that every potential outcome of a quantum event is realized, but each in a different branch of the universe's wave function. Thus, reality continuously splits into multiple branches or worlds. Everett's formulation promised to remove randomness and action at a distance from quantum theory by doing away with collapse and treating all outcomes as equally real. It was a bold solution to the measurement problem. All quantum possibilities exist, not just in the same world that we experience. We're just not in the same world that we experience. All right, so here's how the many worlds interpretation works. Everett's key insight was to apply quantum mechanics to observer and object together. In everyday quantum experiments, we have a measuring apparatus and ultimately a human observer interacting with a microscopic system. According to Everett, before measurement, the combined system is in superposition of all possible outcomes, entangled with all possible observer states. When interaction happens, the wave function doesn't collapse to a single result. Instead, it branches into multiple components. In each branch, the object has a definite outcome and the observer sees that outcome. Each version of the observer perceives a single result, so it appears to them that the wave function collapsed to that outcome. But in reality, other branches with other outcomes also exist, containing counterpart observers who saw those other results. A classic thought experiment makes this vivid, and this is, you're all probably aware, is Schrödinger's cat. We have a cat sealed in a box with a quantum-triggered poison device, according to quantum mechanics, and this is the Copenhagen view. Before we look, the cat's fate is in limbo. A 50% chance it's alive, a 50% chance it's dead. in a superposition of both. In Everett's many worlds picture, there is no ambiguous half-alive cat. Instead, when the critical quantum event, say the radioactive decay, happens, the universe splits into two branches, one where the atom decays, releasing poison and killing the cat, and another where it does not decay and the cat lives. An observer opening the box will become split as well. One version of the observer finds a dead cat in one world, while their counterpart in the other world finds an alive cat or a live cat. Each observer only remembers seeing one outcome. So for them, it's as if the collapse happened, but both outcomes actually occurred, each in a separate branch of reality. As Everett put it from the perspective of the theory, all elements of a superposition, i.e., all branches, are actual, none any more real than the rest. Crucially, once the branching happens, the different worlds do not influence one another. They can't communicate or interfere anymore. They have decohered. Decoherence is a quantum process fleshed out by physicists like H. Dieter Zay and Wojciech Zurich in the decades after Everett that explains how interactions with the environment, like stray atoms or light, cause superpositions to rapidly unravel into non-interacting branches that look classical. Essentially, decoherence forbids us from perceiving the other branch. Once the cat's alive dead states get entangled with a myriad of environmental particles, the two outcomes become like separate, non-communicating realities. Modern quantum theory treats decoherence as the reason we don't observe weird macroscopic superpositions. The many worlds interpretation accepts decoherence and then says each decohered outcome is a full real world. By contrast, Copenhagen would say decoherence just chooses one real outcome and the rest are gone. Everett's view is more extravagant. Nothing ever vanishes. The universe just keeps splitting to accommodate every possibility. In Everett's formulation, the universal wave function, the quantum state of the entire universe, contains within it innumerable branches, each corresponding to a different history. As time goes on, every interaction or measurement-like event causes further branching. Bryce DeWitt, the physicist who popularized Everett's work in the 1970s, described it colorfully. Every quantum transition taking place on every star in every galaxy in every remote corner of the universe is splitting our local world into myriads of copies, proliferating an uncountable number of parallel realities. From moment to moment, each of us is like a fabled amoeba, Everett once used as an analogy, continually splitting into multiple copies when faced with different possible experiences. Yet each copy is not aware of the splitting. It simply finds itself in one branch with a definite outcome. To that copy, the outcome felt random because it could have been otherwise. But in the larger multiverse, nothing random occurred. All outcomes played out. In this way, Many Worlds is able to remove randomness and action at a distance from quantum theory. The evolution of the wave function is deterministic, no dice needed, and local, no instant collapse influencing distant particles. Everett essentially traded the single world uncertainty for an abundance of certainty in multiple worlds. The theory doesn't need a special observer-induced collapse. Quantum mechanics applies universally, even to apparatus and observers. Measurement is just another very complex quantum interaction causing entanglement. From the outside perspective, the wave function of the universe just keeps splitting into a many-branched tree of possibilities. From each inside perspective, it looks like a random collapse happened, but that is an illusion caused by only seeing one branch. Everett's MWI was a bold answer to a question that has been sidestepped. As physicist John Wheeler, Everett's PhD advisor, later said, the many worlds theory basically gives physicists permission to think of the entire universe as quantum mechanical. Under Copenhagen, physicists were taught to draw a line between the quantum system and the classical measuring apparatus, including observer. Everett erased that line. In his view, the observer is just another quantum system, so you don't need classical physics to explain what he sees. By merging the microscopic and macroscopic into one quantum description, Everett introduced what he called the universal wave function for literally everything. As he wrote, all of physics is presumed to follow from this universal wave function alone. Or correction, what he wrote was all of physics is presumed to follow from this function alone. This move was revolutionary because it allowed, in principle, quantum mechanics to be applied to the whole universe, something cosmologists later found very attractive when considering quantum effects in the early universe and even quantum gravity. All right, let's stop for a moment and take a look at some of the comments. Let's see. What is this? Okay, let's see. Indeed, Joe Fox writes, quantum entanglement to me is four sneakers tangled up with their laces in my shoe pile. Okay, John Foxwood, I do know particles communicate no matter the distance. And then Trust You Me is writing, if all are actual, then wouldn't that mean nothing is actually at stake? Yeah, probably. Probably. All right, let's get back to it. Which is how we're doing. Okay, we're doing great on time. Hopefully I don't run out of content by the time this is over. Okay. So parallel universes and the multiverse idea. Everett himself spoke of relative states rather than worlds, but the implication was clear. If the wave function contains many independent branches, then those branches are effectively parallel universes. Each world is a complete self-contained reality with all the particles and people in a particular configuration. The worlds exist in parallel at the same time and space as our own, but do not interact with it once decohered. This is a head-spinning concept, a kind of quantum multiverse. The term many worlds itself was coined by Bryce DeWitt, who championed Everett's interpretation and drew out its startling implications for a broad audience in the 1970s. In the MWI multiverse, time's progression resembles an endlessly branching tree. At every quantum event, the universe timeline forks into multiple paths, one for each outcome. All possible histories consistent with quantum mechanics are realized in some branch. For example, there's a world where you decided not to take a certain risk, and another where you did, a world where a certain star exploded eons ago, and another where it quietly fizzled out. There aren't just hypothetical outcomes. MWI says that they actually happen in our own universes. From our viewpoint, we only experience one chain of events, but there are countless other us in other branches with different experiences. In this sense, MWI's parallel worlds are not distant in space. They occupy the same space, in fact, but are separated in a higher dimensional quantum state space, aka Hilbert space. They are often described as non-interacting parallel realities. Now, it's important to distinguish the many worlds quantum multiverse from other notions of parallel universes in physics and cosmology. The word multiverse is used in several ways, which can be confusing. Below is a brief comparison of different multiverse concepts. All right, so first concept is the one we're talking about, which is quantum many worlds. So the origin and mechanism is quantum branching at measurements, no wave function collapse. Okay. Then there's the next concept is the cosmological bubble multiverse, and this is eternal inflation. And this is repeated Big Bang-like inflationary expansions. Okay. Then there's the brain, and that's BRANE, as in membrane. The brain worlds, and that's extra dimensions. So that's predicted by some string theory models. So this is Randall Sundrum, as an example, where our 3D universe is a brain floating in higher dimensional space. Okay. Um, so other brains could exist in parallel within the extra dimensions. And then there's the mathematical philosophical megaverse or multiverse. That is Tegmark's level 4. So all universes that are mathematically possible exist in a larger ensemble. So this is a highly speculative idea. Universes with entirely different fundamental equations or dimensions exist as complete self-contained mathematical structures. This is more a metaphysical proposal. These universes are completely disjoint and might wholly obey different logic or physics. Okay. So Everett's many worlds interpretation thus provides one physical realization of the multiverse concept. It emerged directly from quantum mechanics, not from cosmological speculation. Interestingly, in later years, physicists found that these multiverse ideas might all coexist. So, for instance, inflationary cosmology might produce a vast multiverse of bubble universes, level 2, and within each bubble, there could be a quantum many world branching, level 3. In other words, if both theories are true, there could be layers of multiverses, an enormous collection of universes spawned by cosmic inflation, and within each splitting quantum branches at every moment. It's a breathtaking vision of reality. Reality becomes an ever-growing tree of branching universes on top of an ocean of myriad Big Bang bubbles. Philosopher physicist Max Tegmark has humorously noted that the level 3 quantum many worlds multiverse does not actually add more universes than you'd already get from an infinite level 1/2 multiverse. It just says those other worlds are in a sense the same ones appearing in quantum branching form. Regardless, the many worlds picture forces us to accept that the universe we experience is just one slice of a much larger, richer reality, a radical form of ontological expansion. Some have compared it to the Copernican revolution in removing Earth's special place. Many worlds removes our universe's special monopoly on reality. As DeWitt described it, our universe is just one of many, and indeed infinitely many, parallel, non communicating worlds. Everett's proposal initially met with resistance or indifference from the physics community of his time. To understand why, it helps to see how key thinkers viewed the quantum conundrum and how they reacted to many worlds. So Hugh Everett himself, who was born in 1930 and lived until 1982, he's the maverick theorist. Everett was in his mid-20s when he devised the relative state formulation, later dubbed MWI. He believed the prevailing Copenhagen interpretation was hopelessly incomplete, a philosophic monstrosity, with its division of reality into classical versus quantum domains. Rather than assume a vaguely defined collapse upon observation, Everett assumed the universal wave function never collapses. Each possible outcome still happens, just not in the same branch. Everett was confident in the mathematical consistency of this idea, but he struggled to get it accepted. His PhD advisor, John Archibald Wheeler, a respected physicist, was intrigued enough to present Everett's ideas to Niels Bohr and others in Copenhagen in 1956. The response was chilly. Bohr and colleagues were uncomfortable with Everett's talk of splitting observers. One colleague dismissed it as theology, not physics. To appease Bohr's camp, Wheeler urged Everett to tone down the language of multi-worlds in his thesis before publication. Indeed, the published 1957 paper makes no overt mention of splitting worlds and was titled Relative State Formation or Formulation. It sank into obscurity for a decade. Disheartened, Everett left academia for a defense research career and never revisited quantum theory in published work. Indeed. Very interesting. Why would the defense establishment want to bring Everett into its fold if his theories were bunk? So he did, however, stick to his guns privately, and live to see a glimmer of vindication. In 1977, he attended a conference organized by DeWitt, where he presented his theory to a wider audience for the first and only time. And then there's John Wheeler, John Archibald Wheeler, the guardian of orthodoxy turned visionary. Wheeler was Everett's mentor and initially an advocate, but he was also a close associate of Bohr. In correspondence, Wheeler tried to sell Everett's ideas as merely an extension of Copenhagen, not a contradiction. Facing Bohr's disapproval, Wheeler distanced himself by the 1960s. He rarely spoke of many worlds. Late in life, however, Wheeler regretted not pursuing Everett's questions further, acknowledging the importance of the issues Everett raised. It's worth noting that Wheeler himself was a fountain of audacious ideas. He coined terms like black hole and wormhole and speculated about quantum processes creating the cosmos, it from bit, and participatory universe. But on quantum interpretation, he leaned toward the view that observers do play a special role, famous for saying no phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is observed. So this is almost opposite to Everett's view that observation is just another interaction. Still, Wheeler later praised Everett's ability to think independently, and he remained intrigued by the notion of a quantum universe as a whole. In a foreword he wrote for a book on Everett, Wheeler mused that the universe does not split with each observation, only the description splits, trying to reconcile many worlds with a single cosmic wave function. His stance remains somewhat equivocal, but he kept the dialogue open. Yeah, what does only the description splits mean? That sounds like meandering, like I can't even think of the proper word for it, but it sounds kind of like a cowardly way to like just take a stand on something, you know. But that's how these figures become famous. They don't take stands, they play politics. So Niels Bohr, he's the Copenhagen sage. Bohr, the giant of early quantum theory, found Everett's approach largely unacceptable. For Bohr, quantum mechanics was about our knowledge of a system, not the system's objective state. He emphasized the necessity of a classical description of measurement results. We as observers are classical beings describing outcomes in classical terms. Bohr felt it was futile to talk about the quantum state of the whole universe or multiple universes, which he likely saw as verging on metaphysics. There's an oft-cited quote attributed to Bohr's, perhaps apocryphally, and this is the quote: "There's no quantum world. There's only an abstract quantum physical description. It is wrong to think the task of physics is to find out how nature is. Physics concerns what we can say about nature." This captures Bohr's instrumentalist philosophy. He may have viewed Everett's many worlds as an attempt to literalize the formalism in a way that wasn't meant for or necessary, wasn't meaningful or necessary. Historically, when Wheeler brought Everett's thesis to Copenhagen, Bohr and his colleagues were polite but unyielding. They raised technical questions like how to define observer and measurement in Everett's terms, right? So it's like, it depends on what the definition of is, that kind of BS. And we're concerned about introducing so many unobservable worlds. Bohr likely felt that Everett had solved the measurement problem by essentially declaring the problem non-existent, since no collapse happens, which to Bohr missed the point that our experience is of a single outcome. Bohr's influence was so great that his open disapproval ensured MWI was marginalized for years. Everett himself, during a 1959 visit to Copenhagen, had lengthy discussions with Bohr, but came away frustrated at having made no dent in Bohr's stance. In short, Bohr held the line that quantum mechanics needed no such multiverse embellishment. One world was enough. Then there's Albert Einstein, the champion of deterministic reality. Einstein did not live to see the many worlds idea, but his philosophical inclinations are very relevant. Einstein believed a physical world or a physical reality exists independently of observation, and that quantum indeterminacy reflects our ignorance, not fundamental randomness. He sought a more complete deterministic theory, like hidden variables. Ironically, Everett's many worlds is deterministic. The wave function obeys a deterministic equation, and it avoids spooky action at distance by having no collapse. In that sense, many worlds aligns with Einstein's demand that God not play dice. We need not assume that nature plays dice, is kind of what he said, as one modern MWI proponent put it. MWI explains why a world appears deterministic to us, even though the underlying theory is deterministic. However, Einstein likely would have been skeptical of multiplying realities. He once remarked that other interpretations, like Schrodinger's, that implied multiple simultaneous realities were like the good Lord playing quantum tricks beyond what we can observe. Einstein's realist instincts might have appreciated Everett's single law, no collapse approach, but the ontological price of myriad actual universes might have struck him as extravagant. There's no record of Einstein commenting on many worlds. It was published 2 years after his death. But we can imagine a conversation. Einstein might ask, what empirical difference does that make, since MWI and Copenhagen make identical predictions? Without a way to test the existence of other branches, Einstein might consider the idea interesting but metaphysical. Still, it addresses some of his concerns. Many worlds has no non-local collapse, so EPR's spooky action is resolved by noting that in other branches, the correlated outcome occurred too, avoiding a need for superluminal influence. Some physicists have noted that MWI removes the most bothersome aspect of non-locality, action at a distance. The EPR paradox cannot get off the ground in MWI because it assumes only one outcome exists. In summary, Einstein might have granted that Everett produced a logically consistent, if ontologically bold, solution to quantum mechanics, deterministic and local. But whether he'd accept those countless unseen worlds as physically real is another matter. Give Einstein's cautious realism, he might have remained dissatisfied, preferring a single reality with hidden variables, as in Bohm's theory, over multiple realities with no hidden variables. And then there's Wolfgang Pauli, the sharpshooter skeptic. Pauli, a brilliant quantum pioneer and close colleague of Bohr, had a famously critical mind. He was not shy about calling ideas not even wrong if they smelled of metaphysics. Pauli essentially sided with Bohr's outlook that one shouldn't speculate about unobservable quantum realities. In a 1954 letter to Max Born, Pauli Riley wrote, quote, "One should no more rack one's brain about whether something one cannot know exists all the same than about the ancient question of how many angels can sit on the point of a needle. But it seems to me that Einstein's questions are ultimately of this kind." This zinger shows Pauli's impatience with debates over what exists beyond what we can measure. He's basically saying, stop worrying about hidden variables or parallel realities, i.e. angels, that we can never observe. He found Einstein's quest for a deeper deterministic reality to be chasing metaphysical ghosts. We can infer Pauli's likely reaction to many worlds. He would probably have rolled his eyes at all those unobservable universes and regarded the idea as an extravagant metaphysical indulgence. Pauli might have quipped that the many worlds idea was überflüssig, superfluous, or superfluous, or even accused it of the sin of hypostatizing the wave function's components. I think it means hypothesizing the wave function's components as separate worlds. Given that Pauli was instrumental in formulating the core of quantum theory, he proposed the exclusion principle, worked with Heisenberg on quantum field theory, etc. He respected the theory's formalism, but was philosophically aligned with Bohr in not assigning independent reality to the wave function without observation. It is notable that Pauli had a deep interest in the philosophy of science and even in Jungian psychology. So the Pauli-Jung dialogue on synchromysticism, which shows he was open-minded in some domains. But regarding multiple physical worlds, it's hard to imagine Pauli as an enthusiast. He might have seen Everett's theory as a clever curiosity that doesn't solve any practical problem. After all, Pauli demanded that a new theory yield some new prediction or clarity, which MWI did not empirically. So Pauli likely would have remained a staunch one-worlder, cautioning against angels on a needle speculation. So in summary, the many worlds interpretation provoked a mix of fascination and skepticism among physicists and continues to do so. In the 1950s, Bohr's authority and the lack of direct evidence for other worlds kept Everett's idea on the fringe. But in the 1970s to 1980s, attitudes began shifting as younger physicists and cosmologists revisited foundational questions. Bryce DeWitt's 1970 article in Physics Today and subsequent writings introduced a generation to Everett's multiverse. When DeWitt initially told Everett he could not feel himself split, Everett replied that critics of Copernicus also said that they did not feel Earth moving. A sharp retort pointing out the lack of subjective sensation is no proof against the theory. Later physicists like David Deutsch, a quantum computing pioneer, and Max Tegmark, a cosmologist, became outspoken supporters of MWI in the 1990s and 2000s, arguing it is the simplest, most straightforward interpretation of quantum mechanics. Stephen Hawking at one point said, quote, "When I hear of Schrodinger's cat, I reach for my gun," end quote, humorously indicating impatience. But later in life, he seemed open to the multiverse idea via quantum cosmology. Murray Gell-Mann and James Hartle formulated a similar many histories approach via decoherence, the consistent histories interpretation, which is akin to Everett's idea without the fanfare of many worlds. In contrast, others like Roger Penrose and Gerard 't Hooft have been critical, preferring either objective collapse theories or hidden variable approaches. The debate is far from settled, but many worlds has transitioned from heresy to a respectable, is still controversial interpretation. It's considered one of the mainstream interpretations along Copenhagen, pilot wave, or Bohmian mechanics, and objective collapse models. All right, let's take a breather from that, and let's see what folks have to say. Okay. Okay, so Fred's saying when Jesus said, "If someone offends a child, it would have been better to get a millstone tied to his neck." Doesn't that imply there's a parallel universe and he could see the outcomes? Maybe. It's a long time ago. Yeah, Billy, I'll put it up. It's just give me a second. Okay. There you go, Billy. Funny you mentioned that, Billy. This actually came up with a friend today, literally today. So another synchronicity. You know, someone he knows and is really close to is been plagued by sleep paralysis and has been seeing figures and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely send that to me. How you doing, Isness Magic? Good to see you. Yep, spooky action in the distance for sure. Hey, Jalal, good to see you. All right, let's. I have no idea how much more stuff I have to get through, but we're gonna get into the more interesting speculative stuff. But I think what I've gone through is pretty helpful, at least for me, in understanding how the many worlds theory works. I kind of had a good idea before, but I think I have a little bit of a better idea. Again, that's if the AI is correct. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. All right, here we go. All right, now we're going to talk about how many worlds meets general relativity and cosmology. One intriguing aspect of Everett's universal wave function idea is that it opened the door to discussing quantum mechanics on cosmic scales. In the 1980s, cosmologists like Stephen Hawking and Alexander Vilenkin began to consider quantum effects in the early universe where no external observer existed to quote unquote collapse the wave function. The many worlds approach was a natural fit for quantum cosmology. It allows the entire universe to be in superposition of different states, say different geometries or distribution of matter, without invoking a mystical collapse by an observer outside the universe. Everett himself foresaw this application. In his thesis, he speculated that his framework, quote, may provide a fruitful framework for the quantization of general relativity, end quote. This hint lay dormant for years, but later efforts to unify quantum mechanics with general relativity, i.e., quantum gravity, indeed had to grapple with what it meant to have a wave function of the universe. So the Wheeler-DeWitt equation in quantum gravity, for example, describes a wave function for the entire cosmos, a direct conceptual descendant of Everett's universal wave function idea. In cosmology, one striking realization is that if MWI is correct, then cosmic events like inflation or the exponential expansion of the very early universe could spawn different outcomes in different branches. Some cosmologists have even combined the inflationary multiverse with many worlds. For instance, Max Tegmark's hierarchy of multiverse regards many worlds, level 3, as an extension of the level 1 to cosmological multiverse. There's a synergy. External inflation might create an ensemble of bubble universes, and quantum fluctuations during inflation could lead to branches so that each bubble splits into many quantum outcomes. In one branch, a given bubble might have a slightly different cosmic microwave background pattern than in another, etc. All branches exist in the multiverse of inflation. General relativity itself, being a classical theory, doesn't have many worlds. It has one space-time per solution. But when you quantize gravity, you might get a superposition of different space-time geometries. Some exotic proposals even consider entire universes branching or merging. Lee Smolin's cosmological natural selection, a speculative idea where new universes are born inside black holes, is a different take on a multiverse, but not quantum many worlds. Andre Lindy once mused that perhaps different quantum branches could end up as separate universes that no longer interfere, sounding much like Everett's worlds. One concrete intersection of quantum theory with general relativity is in black holes and wormholes. So wormholes are hypothetical tunnels through space-time allowed by Einstein's equations. In some solutions, a wormhole could potentially connect two different universes. As Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is a non-traversable wormhole in the Schwarzschild black hole solution, mathematically has two mouths that look like two separate universes connected at a single point through which you can actually travel through the class through or though you can actually travel through in the classical solution. Theoretically, if a traversable wormhole could be stabilized, and it requires exotic negative energy, it might act as a shortcut connecting different regions or possibly two entirely separate spacetimes. This raises the sci-fi possibility of travel between parallel universes via wormholes. Indeed, theorists have considered time travel paradoxes and found that many worlds could resolve them. If you go back in time and change something, you simply enter a different branch of the multiverse, avoiding contradictions. In the early 1990s, David Deutsch showed that quantum mechanics with closed time-like curves is self-consistent if we use the many worlds picture. Essentially, the grandfather paradox is resolved because the universe branches into one where you exist and one where you don't. In such a model, if a particle goes back and does something, it emerges not into its original world, but into an alternative one. This led to the notion that a wormhole time machine would effectively be a bridge between parallel universes, an idea sometimes dubbed the Everett phone, a way to send messages to alternative worlds. Physicist Joseph Polchinski described how if quantum mechanics were nonlinear, one might exploit that to communicate between branches. He also called it an Everett phone. But in standard linear quantum mechanics, it won't work. So far, all of this remains theoretical and speculative. We have no evidence wormholes actually exist, let alone allow inter-universe travel. Traversable wormholes would require violations of energy conditions, basically exotic matter, and even then, some analyses suggest quantum effects would destroy them if used for time travel. Still, the link between many worlds and wormholes is a tantalizing one in theoretical physics. If time travel is possible at all, many worlds might be the way nature avoids paradox by creating new branches for each trip. In short, general relativity on its own doesn't demand many worlds, but when combined with quantum theory, it paints a strange picture when entire universes can branch or connect. MWI allows us to talk about a quantum state of spacetime without an external observer, which is essential if we ever want a quantum theory of gravity. As Wheeler noted, only Everett's approach lets us discuss the quantum universe mechanically and still may be self-consistent with relativity, since there's no need for an external classical realm. Modern quantum cosmology models, like Hartle-Hawking wave function of the universe proposal, or the Hartle-Hawking wave function of the universe proposal, often implicitly adopt an Everettian stance. All possible universes described by the wave function are considered and probabilities are assigned via something like the Born rule for an observer who finds themselves in one branch. Some cosmologists like Alexander Vilenkin and Andre Lindy or Linda, I don't know how to pronounce it, but have embraced the multiverse idea, though usually in the cosmic inflation sense, yet conceptually, the quantum multiverse and the inflationary multiverse sometimes blur together in discourse. All right, let's take a deep breath because now we're going to get into some of the speculative portion of this show. All right, let's see. How you doing, Kaysen? Good to see you. Yeah, Joe, ChatGPT asked me if I wanted to do it for the description for an academic audience or a general audience, and I said a very intelligent general audience. So I guarantee if we did the academic thing, I would be reading equations. Tribble Nubbins is saying, nah, you can traverse an Einstein-Rosen bridge. You just have to try to look good at doing it. Okay, so Ben Rao is writing, when you have to observe energy conservation theory, how do you split energy into endless multiple universes? That's a fair question. That's definitely a fair question. Maybe that's what all that dark energy is, right? Dark energy and dark matter. Maybe that's where it comes from. It's like 96% of the observed universe. Well, it's not observed. Scientists don't really know what it is. Okay. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so we asked the question, could we reach another world? Theoretical portals and mechanisms. According to orthodox many worlds, the different branches are effectively non-communicating. Once they decohere, they don't influence each other. Each world is like a sealed bubble of reality. However, it is natural to wonder, could there be some extraordinary way to travel or send information between these parallel universes? Science fiction loves the idea of sliding between alternate timelines or universes. While no known physics permits this, let's explore a few theoretical mechanisms often discussed and assess whether they offer any hope of interworld travel, especially for a non-human intelligence, perhaps an advanced alien or otherworldly being, to enter our universe from another. All right, so the first way could be quantum interference and reconnecting branches. In principle, before complete decoherence, branches of the wave function can still interfere. This is what produces quantum interference patterns in experiments, like the double slit. One could say the particle's amplitudes from world A went through slit 1 and world B went through slit 2. Interfere to create a pattern or the pattern. Once an observer record is made, like a detector at the slit, interference disappears and you get decoherence. But if one could reverse decoherence, erase the which path information, interference can return. This is called quantum eraser. This is called the quantum eraser experiment. This is not the same as fully merging two macroscopic worlds, but it shows that quantum branches aren't fundamentally separate until decoherence is irreversible. David Deutsch has argued that when we observe interference, we are seeing interaction between neighboring universes momentarily. For example, in a quantum computer with qubits in superposition, the combination can be viewed as split into parallel branches that later interfere to produce a final answer. Deutsch famously suggested that quantum computing is evidence of the reality of other worlds. The machine's results are achieved by a kind of coordinated calculation across many branches of the multiverse. However, this interaction is limited to subtle effects and doesn't allow a message or object to hop from one full-fledged classical world to another. It's like two shadows overlapping. They affect each other's pattern, but they don't exchange material. A second way is quantum tunneling of universes. Quantum tunneling in normal circumstances allows a particle to appear on the other side of a barrier it couldn't classically cross by exploiting the probabilistic spread of its wave function. One might ask, could an entire person or alien tunnel from one branch to another? In standard MWI, the answer is effectively no. Branches differ by a macroscopically large number of particles in different configurations, and the amplitude for spontaneously transitioning from one such state to another is astronomically small. It would be like all air molecules in your room randomly moving into the next room, not forbidden by physics, but ridiculously improbable, a thermodynamic near impossibility. The many worlds viewpoint would say that you would find yourself in a branch where such a huge fluctuation happened, or you won't find yourself in a branch where such a huge fluctuation happened, unless an incredibly vast number of worlds are considered, and even then it's effectively zero probability from your perspective. So tunneling between worlds is not something expected to ever occur naturally. However, if a superintelligent being had technology to manipulate quantum states on a colossal scale, perhaps they could induce a specific interference pattern that makes two branches recohere into one. Some speculative proposals, like the many interacting worlds (MIW) approach, and that's a 2014 idea by Michael Hall and colleagues, imagine that parallel worlds could exert a tiny force on each other and even collide under certain conditions, producing quantum effects. MIW is more an alternative formulation than a proven theory, but it entertains the thought that if worlds can interact, maybe one could engineer a controlled interaction. At one current understanding, however, or at our current understanding, however, there is no known way to hop between decohered branches. The math and quantum mechanics, being linear, forbids a controlled transfer of information between ontological branches. All right, another thing to look at is frequency or dimensional tuning. In science fiction and some other fringe theories, one encounters the idea that each universe or dimension has a certain vibrational frequency. And if you match it, you can shift into that universe. In actual physics, there isn't a concept of universes distinguished by frequency, though vibration analogies are sometimes used in string theory. It refers to particle modes, not whole universes. However, one might draw an analogy. Each branch of the wave function can be thought of as having a definite quantum phase relation. If an advanced being could manipulate its quantum state to have a phase overlap with a state in another branch, perhaps it could slide into that branch. This is highly speculative and beyond conventional theory. Another notion is resonance. Maybe two universes that are initially separated could resonate via some higher dimensional medium. In brain world scenarios, and that's again BRANE, brain, if our universe is a 3D membrane in a higher dimensional space, another brain could be in a parallel universe. If there are oscillations or vibrations in the extra dimension, maybe brains would occasionally touch or an object could transfer from one to another. According to brain world physics, normally particles and forces like electromagnetism are stuck on the brain, but gravity can leak out into the bulk space. Some have proposed that rare cosmic events like brain collisions might cause what we perceive as big bangs, or that maybe gravity waves could reveal the presence of a neighboring brain universe. If a non-human intelligence somehow existed in the higher dimensional bulk, it could potentially move between brains, effectively visiting multiple universes. But this is all speculative as we have no evidence for such beings or brains so far, at least officially, since our government constantly lies to us. String theory does permit such ideas, for example, the notion of a graviton particle escaping into extra dimensions, or two brains connecting via a throat, or i.e., a wormhole. But it's firmly theoretical at this point. Another way would be wormholes and spatial portals. As discussed, a wormhole could theoretically connect different universes. If an extremely advanced civilization could create and stabilize a traversable wormhole, they might aim one mouth at their universe and another at ours. This would be more like traveling through a shortcut in a higher dimension than quantum jumping. The wormhole solution found by Kip Thorne and collaborators in 1988 allowed two distant regions of our universe to be connected. Extending one mouth outside our universe is speculative. However, in some cosmological models, like chaotic inflation, bubble universes might occasionally collide or have thin domain walls between them. One could imagine a wormhole as a bridge through the bulk space between bubbles. A highly advanced universe might exploit physics at the Planck scale, where quantum foam dominates, to poke a hole from one universe's space-time into another. Interestingly, wormholes might also allow time travel, which, as noted, likely implies many worlds to resolve paradoxes. So any beings using wormholes freely might by default be branching into new universes whenever they make a closed time-like curve trip, effectively doing interuniversal travel. All of this remains theoretical. We haven't seen a wormhole or evidence of visitors from other universes. Consciousness and dimensional shifts. Some speculative ideas, often bordering on metaphysics, suggest that perhaps consciousness could transcend branches, or that a mind could tune into alternate realities, as in some interpretations of the many minds variant of MWI, or experiences reported in quantum mysticism contexts. These are not scientific theories, but since the question involves consciousness studies, one might ask, could a sufficiently advanced consciousness move between branches, even if physical bodies cannot? The mainstream scientific answer is that consciousness is likely an emergent property of physical processes in our brain, which are part of a particular branch. When a branching happens, there isn't one single consciousness straddling both outcomes. Rather, it splits into two streams of consciousness, one per branch. There's no known mechanism for those to fuse back or communicate. However, thinkers like Eugene Wigner or Henry Stapp, who contemplated quantum mind effects, might entertain more exotic possibilities. Wigner originally thought consciousness causes collapse. In MWI terms, one could rephrase that as the conscious mind selecting one branch. Wigner's friend paradox, where you have an observer inside a quantum experiment observed by another, highlights the stranger role of the conscious observer in quantum theory. MWI resolves Wigner's friend by saying both the friend's observed outcome and the superposed state to the outside observer exist in a larger entangled state. Some interpretations, like Many Minds, prosed by H. Dieter Zay and others in the 1990s, tried to separate the branching of the physical world from the branching of the mind, suggesting each observer's mind might randomly experience one branch while physical reality is many. Those are highly interpretational and arguably add more complication. In any case, nothing in known neuroscience or physics supports that a consciousness could hop to a timeline where, say, a loved one survived instead of died, a common fantasy. That remains the realm of fiction or unverified speculation. In summary, no established physics currently allows travel or communication between parallel Everett worlds. The linear, unitary nature of quantum mechanics seems to prohibit it. If it were possible, one could in principle signal faster than light or violate conservation laws. The branches are not alternate places you can point a spaceship toward. They are separated by quantum decoherence, not spatial distance. To enter another branch, one would essentially need to reverse the decoherence and merge the quantum states, which for a macroscopic system is effectively impossible without any reasonable resources. Nonetheless, theoretical explorations provide some consolidation. If interworld interaction is possible at all, it likely requires new physics beyond quantum mechanics as we know it. Perhaps a theory with slight nonlinearity or additional dimensions that could couple otherwise separate worlds. The concept of an Everett phone, a hypothetical device to talk to other universes, was shown to be impossible under standard quantum theory unless a nonlinear tweak is present. So far, experiments uphold the linear Schrödinger equation strictly, so we have no hint of leakage between worlds. Advanced aliens haven't popped in. Excuse me. Advanced aliens haven't popped in through a wormhole or quantum portal that we can tell. If they had, we might see very bizarre phenomena, objects appearing, disappearing, inexplicably, violations of quantum probabilities. I don't know. We see a lot of UAPs act that way, but I don't know. You do you, Chat GPT. We'll see. Given none of that has been documented in reproducible form, we must conclude that if parallel universes exist, they remain isolated, or any interactions are extremely subtle. That said, the philosophical implications of the mere existence of those other universes can be profound, even without physical travel between them. All right, let's take a quick break. Let's see. Yep, bubbles within bubbles, field bumps, swirling iridescent vibes. Isn't this magic? Kason Lee writes, is it true that you cannot time travel back and change history because time is compartmentalized? So if you change one compartment to the next compartment is not affected by the change. Well, I mean, according to Everett's many worlds theory, it's just a separate branch. So you might not be born in that branch, but you wouldn't nullify your birth in the branch that you came from. So you wouldn't disappear if you murdered your father, for example, according to Everett's many worlds theory. I didn't forget Podolsky. ChatGPT forgot Podolsky. Garius. Okay, so Scott Ian is writing, if consciousness is the infinite energy in the universe, then any split of consciousness would supply the energy for that universe, maybe? Who knows? Each universe has 13 levels, and then there's 49 different, yeah, who knows? Yeah, who knows? So I'm cold is writing, I heard somewhere it's harder to time travel backwards than it is forward. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like if you could somehow punch a hole into a parallel universe, that's how you would time travel. Hmm. Okay. All right. How we doing on time? All right. We still doing fine. All right. So the next part of this segment is consciousness, identity, and quantum worlds. So Everett's theory challenges our intuitions about personal identity and consciousness. If every time a quantum event with multiple outcomes occur, you split into multiple copies, what does that say about you? Each copy thinks of itself as the unique original, remembering the same past, but now experiencing a different present. Does the original you cease to exist, replaced by many successors, or were there always many versions of you in a larger sense? These questions border on philosophy of mind. One might adopt the view that you are identified within a single branch of the wave function. Once branching happens, the copies are distinct persons who share a common ancestor history. From that point on, their experiences diverge, so they are as separate as twins that grew up in different environments, only even more so. There is no central observer that straddles multiple branches. Each branch has its own observer. However, some have speculated about a form of quantum immortality. If all outcomes happen, then in branches where you might have died, there are other branches where you survived. So subjectively, you might never experience your own death because there will always be at least one branch where you continue to live. This is a very controversial thought experiment, often illustrated by the quantum suicide scenario proposed by cosmologist Max Tegmark and philosopher Heinz Moravec. In that scenario, a person gambles with a lethal quantum experiment repeatedly. MWI implies that there will always be a branch where they miraculously survive every time, and only that branch's observer remains aware, effectively feeling immortal, while others die in their respective branches. Of course, from an outside perspective, the probability of survival after many trials is nearly zero, and most branches see the experimenter dead. Whether this counts as true immortality is debatable. It's a bit of tautology that you can only observe outcomes in which you are alive. It doesn't provide a way to move into a branch where you survived. It just says that if such branches exist, you, as a conscious being, will trivially find yourself in one of the survival branches because in any branch where you died, you're no longer an observer. While thought provoking, this doesn't help anyone else in a different branch. Your friends might lose you in their branch, even if another you lives on elsewhere. Most physicists consider quantum immortality a philosophical musing, not an encouragement to take risks. In terms of consciousness causing collapse, the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, um, many worlds often offers an opposite perspective. Consciousness doesn't collapse the wave function; it splits with it. Your mind state becomes a superposition of seeing outcome A and seeing outcome B, which evolves into two separate mind states in different worlds. This removes the mystical role of mind in physics and instead brings mind fully into the physical fold, albeit at the cost of spawning mind copies. Some philosophers, like David Lewis, with his concept of modal realism, all possible worlds are as actual as the real world, finds a curious parallel in MWI. It's almost a physical version of the idea that all possibilities exist, but MWI's worlds constantly multiply and are not arbitrary possible worlds. They must follow from the one wave functions in the Schrodinger equation. There have been attempts to reconcile many worlds with our sense of a singular self through ideas like the many minds interpretation proposed by H. Dieter Zay and later by others, where one distinguishes between the physical branching and the mental branching. In such a view, perhaps the universe branches, but an individual mind perceives a random outcome because the mind itself splits into multiple minds when they diverge, which then diverge. It basically rephrases MWI in terms of mind splitting instead of worlds, which some find more plausible or at least different philosophically. However, this does not change any predictions. It's just an interpretive guess or an interpretive gloss. From a consciousness studies perspective, including fields like cognitive science or even Eastern philosophy, many worlds raises fascinating questions. If all outcomes exist, do all our choices and thoughts exist in some world? This might touch free will. Do we create new universes by deciding, or do they already exist and we just find ourselves on one path? MWI is actually a very deterministic theory at the fundamental level. The universal wave function's evolution is fixed by initial conditions. So, in that sense, it's like a super deterministic block universe, just a very large one. But within each branch, observers experience apparent randomness for events and can imagine they have free will to choose one outcome, though other branches see the other choices. Philosophers debate if many worlds gives every possible outcome or only those allowed by the wave's function structure. It's the latter. You can't get a logically consistent world out of MWI, only variations consistent with the same physics and initial state. So, not literally every fantasy occurs, but arguably extremely many do, including one close to any scenario physically possible. David Deutsch even remarked that if a fictional world obeys the laws of physics, it exists in the quantum multiverse. He gave the whimsical example there likely is a universe somewhere in the multiverse where the events of Wuthering Heights, minus any supernatural elements, play out, but not one with actual magic like Harry Potter, since that violates physics. This illustrates how vast the space of possibilities is, yet constrained by physical law. The existence of innumerable versions of us might also prompt existential or spiritual questions. Are these souls of a sort? Do they diminish our uniqueness, or do they actualize every potential in a grander existence? Some thinkers in metaphysics might draw connections to the idea of the universe or a larger multiverse as exploring all possibilities, a concept that resonates oddly with certain interpretations of ancient philosophies, like the idea of Brahman playing hide and seek in Hindu cosmology, or the many worlds being a scientific analog of the idea of multiple planes of existence. But such analogies must be made carefully. MWI is born of mathematics, not metaphysics, though it has many metaphysical implications. All right, so why many worlds? Pros, cons, and philosophical implications. Why take the many worlds interpretation seriously, given its wild claims? Advocates argue that MWI is appealing because it is maximally straightforward and consistent. It applies quantum mechanics universally and needs no special rules. In doing so, it solves the measurement problem by denying any single outcome and eliminates the mysterious collapse process, which troubled Einstein and others. It also eliminates the need for an ill-defined divide between quantum and classical realms. To many physicists who demand logical completeness, this is a huge plus. As physicist Sean Carroll puts it, MWI simply follows the math. The Schrödinger equation says superpositions continue, so they do. Just because our perception is single outcome doesn't mean that the other outcomes aren't there. In that sense, many worlds takes quantum mechanics at face value. Another argument in favor is that MWI, together with decoherence theory, has been successful in explaining why we perceive classical definiteness without adding new physics. The theory doesn't need wave function collapse as an axiom, so it's more economical in terms of fundamental postulates, though less economical in terms of assumed reality. According to Occam's razor, one might argue either side. Copenhagen multiples assumptions, or Copenhagen multiplies assumptions, adding collapse, while many worlds multiplies worlds. Which is the bigger cost? This is debated. Everett's defenders say the formal simplicity outweighs the ontological extravagance, whereas critics say adding zillions of unobservable universes is an outrageous price to pay for removing one abstract postulate. The criticism most often leveled is, if we can never observe these other worlds, isn't MWI unfalsifiable and thus not really a scientific theory? Indeed, no experiment to date can distinguish MWI from standard quantum mechanics with collapse. All predictions for lab experiments come out the same, since each branch individually obeys the same probabilities given by the Born rule, which MWI has to derive or assume. Many worlds predicts nothing new that we can test. It only provides an explanation for why the outcomes appear random to us. Philosophers of science have wrestled with whether this is a fatal flaw. Some point out that all interpretations of quantum mechanics, Copenhagen, Bohm's pilot wave, etc., are empirically equivalent in their standard forms, so dismissing MWI on those grounds means all interpretations are meaningless and one should, quote, shut up and calculate. But for those of us interested in what really might be like, what reality might be like behind the equations, interpretations matter. Proponents would say MWI could be falsified if, for example, an experiment ever showed genuine collapse, contradicting unitary evolution. Thus far, no violation of linear quantum mechanics has been seen, even in tests pushing the size of superpositions, like interference of large molecules. If one day a definite collapse mechanism, like the objective collapse theories of Gherardi, Ramini, Weber, or Penrose's gravity-induced collapse were confirmed, MWI would be falsified. Until then, it remains viable. Another challenge is the probability problem in MWI. If all outcomes happen, what does it mean to talk about probability? Why do we perceive some outcomes tend to be likelier than others, following Born's rule that the probability is the wave function amplitude squared? Everett tried to derive the Born rule by reasoning that an observer will self-locate in one branch or another with frequency proportional to these amplitudes. Modern Everettian proponents have offered decision theory arguments, notably by David Wallace and others, to show that an agent should rationally assign subjective probabilities equal to the branch weight. While these arguments are clever, not everyone is convinced they are totally satisfying philosophically. It remains a subject of active discussion in a world where everything happens. What exactly is probability? It becomes a measure of the measure, thickness or weight of branches rather than a fundamental chance. Critics like Adrian Kent have argued this is circular or ambiguous. Still, many worlders claim that they have resolved it to their satisfaction essentially by invoking symmetry and rationality arguments to recover the usual rules. There's also a human factor. Some physicists simply find many worlds extravagant and disturbing. The idea that each measurement splits you and creates other yous living out different fates can be unsettling or even seem absurd. As physicist Rolf Landauer once said, MWI is what happens when schizophrenia meets quantum mechanics. Some fear it violates Occam's razor dramatically by posing an excess of realities. Others retort that Occam's razor in physics is about the simplicity of laws, not the count of entities. If a theory's laws are simple but imply many entities, that's acceptable. For example, cosmology posits billions of galaxies because a simple Big Bang model implies them. In MWI, there is one simple law, Schrodinger's equation, but many implied worlds, analogous to one Big Bang law making many galaxies. Philosophically, many worlds raises questions of meaning and ethics. If every possible outcome occurs, do the choices we make matter? One might worry this leads to a form of fatalism or apathy. Some version of me wins lottery, so why not me? Is there a version of where I did the right thing, so does it matter if I do it here? However, from the perspective of any single branch, which is all we ever experience, our choices do matter. They determine which branch we end up in and what we and those around us experience. The existence of other branches don't affect the reality we are in. It's akin to how, even if you know other people in distant parts of the universe exist, it doesn't make your own life choices irrelevant. Additionally, one could argue MWA actually increases a sense of responsibility in a peculiar way. In some branch, a bad outcome of a risky action will happen. So you can't assume everything will be fine. In some world, it won't. But it also means in some world it will be fine. This can play mind games with decision making, but rational decision theory in MWI ends up recommending you behave as if the probabilities are as normal, because you don't get to choose which branch you'll personally experience. Finally, many worlds has interesting implications for the nature of reality itself. It suggests reality is far larger than the part that we can see. somewhat analogous to the discovery of galaxies, expanded our cosmic perspective. Some philosophers see it as a form of modal realism or suggest it supports a kind of Platonism. All outcomes exist in an abstract quantum state space. Other questions if the other worlds are any less real just because we don't see them. After all, we don't see atoms directly, but we take them to be real due to the theory. Is it any different to take other branches as real if the theory implies them? MWI pushes us to broaden our concept of existence. In a many worlds cosmos, reality is not a single narrative thread, but a vast, ever branching tree of narratives. This has sometimes been seized upon by metaphysical or spiritual writers who like the idea that all possibilities and perhaps all values or meanings are realized. It can be seen as either uplifting, nothing is lost forever, somewhere the best outcomes happen, or terrifying, every horror also happens somewhere. It also intersects with ideas of the multiverse and culture, from science fiction, like the multiverse of Marvel and DC Comics, or the mirror universes in shows like Star Trek, although those are usually handled as parallel timelines one can cross, which is not how MWI works in practice. To speculative discussions about whether paranormal phenomenon could be bleed through from other universes. No evidence, but interesting to think about how one might test that. All right, so in conclusion, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics remains one of the most profound and contentious ideas in modern science. It takes the mathematical formalism of quantum theory to its ultimate conclusion that the universe we experience is just one facet of a much larger quantum reality in which all possible events happen. This implies a verifiable or a veritable infinity of parallel universes branching off at every moment, containing versions of ourselves and others, living out all the might have beens. We have traced the origins of the idea from Hugh Everett's audacious 1957 thesis through initial rejection by Bohr and others to its gradual acceptance and refinement by later physicists like DeWitt, Wheeler, Deutsch, and Tegmark. We've seen how many worlds meshes with the deterministic desires of Einstein while offending his sense of parsimony, clashes with the pragmatic Copenhagen view of Bohr and Pauli, and invites deep inquiry into how we define reality. Scientifically, MWI offers a solution to the measurement problem without ad hoc rules at the cost of accepting that reality is far more expansive than we observe. It has been fruitful in certain domains like quantum cosmology and quantum computing thought experiments, giving conceptual clarity that one can discuss the wave function of the entire universe and even closed time-like curves without paradox. Yet it also faces the criticism of being empirically indistinguishable from other interpretations. It's a framework for understanding, not a new theory that makes new testable predictions, unless one counts the continued absence of collapse evidence as support. Theoretical mechanisms for interacting with or traveling to these alternate universes remain speculative at best. Wormholes might bridge universes but require physics we don't have. Quantum interference hints at other branches but don't let us interchange information. Talk of tuning frequencies or other dimensional tricks currently lies outside confirmed science. For now, the parallel worlds of MWI seem destined to remain separate, each an isolated bubble of reality. Philosophically, many worlds forces us to confront questions of determinism, free will, and identity in a novel way. It's a deterministic theory globally. The wave function obeys strict laws, yet yields apparent randomness and choice locally because an observer only ever inhabits one branch. It tells us that everything that can happen does happen, raising more moral puzzles, but our experience stays that of one path, so our ethical and personal decisions still shape the world we know. Some find it disquieting that you are not unique. There are countless versions, but perhaps it's analogous to how we came to accept Earth is not the center of the universe. Our branch is not central or preferred, it's one of many. In a many worlds universe, reality is fundamentally plural. This opens up a vast canvas for imagination, perhaps consciousness or life or even civilizations exist in forms we can't fathom in other branches. never to meet ours, but real in their own right. It adds weight to the idea that the universe is teeming not just with life, as astrobiology hopes, but with every conceivable history, a grand multiverse of narratives. At the same time, Many Worlds offers a kind of comfort to some. It removes the absolute finality of quantum events. If a quantum accident in this world is devastating, there's solace, however abstract, that in another world things were different or went differently. Einstein once asked whether the moon exists only when we look at it. In many worlds, the moon exists in all phases and possibilities, whether or not we look. And there are worlds where we see it, and worlds where clouds cover it. Reality does not hinge on our observation; rather, our observation carves out one reality from the fullness of the universal wave function. This shifts the role of observer. We are no longer magicians conjuring reality by measuring it, as some Copenhagen rhetoric implied, but travelers following one trajectory through the greater quantum cosmos. From the perspective of non human intelligences and consciousness, if such entities exist outside our known world, be they hypothetical aliens in another universe, or forms of AI or higher dimensional beings, the framework of Many Worlds would say they have their own branches. Could they come here? Probably not through any ordinary means. But the fact that the multiverse allows such a broad scope means one can't rule out surprises. If new physics or dimensions are discovered, what now seems impossible, like traversing universes, might someday become conceivable. Until then, we work within our one branch, trying to glean the structure of the whole. In closing, the Many Worlds interpretation stands as a testament to the richness of scientific thinking, an idea at the border of physics, philosophy, and even science fiction. It challenges us to rethink what we mean by universe and reminds us that our perception might not reveal all of existence. Whether or not it is the ultimate truth, exploring its implications deepens our understanding of quantum mechanics and of reality itself. As our knowledge advances through more precise experiments, potential unification of quantum theory and gravity, and combined philosophical analysis, we may inch closer to determining if we truly inhabit one of many worlds, or if, after all is said and done, there is just one single reality. Until that day, the multiverse will remain a profound and captivating possibility, inviting us to imagine worlds beyond sight and to question the very meaning of existence in a quantum universe. All right, that ends the prepared portion of this radio show. So let me just go back and hit the comments. Let's see. Wow, lots of comments now. Okay, we got that. Bring tuna. Okay. Okay, so Fred's writing to I'm cold. In classical physics, it's easy to time travel to the future if you can just travel fast, but impossible to go to the past. Yep. General relativity would suggest that. All right, so Roger Claiborne is writing I have a hypothesis that all matter at the smallest quantum level, matter blinks in and out of existence at light speed. Thus, light speed is the fastest rate of flow and change. Cliff High apparently says the same thing, according to Jalal Jalal. All right, if everything is happening simultaneously at once on a singular timeline, maybe you could move up and down. Yeah, or it's this frequency thing. Imagine the smallest quantum scale of pixel Planck scale has three charges, negative, neutral, positive, that blink in and out of some pixel space, but at light speed frequency, as Roger Claiborne is saying. Roger Claiborne is also saying our universe has one frequency, but two others could occupy the same space, but at an alternative frequency. Yep. Physics without that fifth baseline behind what we see, quantum geometry, EPR, and quantum tunneling. Don't worry about many universes before we take the first step, is what Garius Garfar is writing. Okay, Jalal is writing, yes, this is described by black hole center radiates light, white hole center radiates darkness, and a neutral on the subatomic level. All right, Peaches Cream is writing, listen to the telepathy tapes if you haven't already done so. Gary Escafar is writing M theory, like string theory, designed to divert the mind. So he's talking M theory is M brain theory is what he's talking about when I talk about the different brains in hyperdimensional space, so the bulk space. Roger Claiborne is writing, all our subatomic particles may blink in and out at light speed or faster, and we may not be continuous manifestations after all, and thus our consciousness may frequency shift to other potentials. Yeah, that's kind of what Itzhak Bentov was saying, that we cohere and decohere, but it happens so quickly we don't notice it. I'm cold is writing, autistic people and children sometimes excel in different aspects, like Rain Man kind of cards. Hey, thank you so much, Jalal, for the $10. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I believe me, I'm going through it the first time when I'm reading it here, so I'm being educated too. I can't guarantee that ChatGPT is not going to hallucinate at any step, but just do your own research. But I think it sounds like we're kind of directionally correct. But thank you so much. I really appreciate the super chat, super thanks. Very much appreciate that. Thinks the kids have matches. Okay, so the Lacerda briefing called this area where the travel occurs the Feldkrum. Woo! Yeah, that was. Now I gotta find 26 minutes of content after that. What questions do people have? That was a lot of dense content. Thanks for hanging in with me on that. It's kind of interesting stuff, though. I mean, basically, quantum mechanics operates. Yeah, it's definitely a mind twist. I'm cold. It's definitely a mind bender. But quantum mechanics is always predicated on these probability distributions, right? And then when in the wave function, there's a probability of where the electron's going to end up, and then when it actually hits the screen, that's when the wave function, quote unquote, collapses. And the many worlds theory basically says, well, it just never collapses. It just every possible outcome happens in every possible universe. And sometimes it just branches off, and then you scale that all the way up to the macro level, and that's where you just get something approaching, if not an infinite number of variations. Now, where it wasn't clear is what it means to decohere. Like once we get an outcome, what happens to that, all the other possibilities that decohered at that moment, right? What does that mean? And I don't think it was very clear from what we talked about. And then if it did decohere, how could you reach back into that alternative universe and even either communicate it or make a connection with it? And there's just so many other, and there's other conceptions of kind of multiple universes where you have this bulk theory, this M dash brain theory, right? Where there's a hyperdimensional space called the bulk, and all these universes are floating in the bulk, and if they ever collide, it causes a big bang. But there might be a way to punch through from one universe to another, right? So the thing is, we were talking about how there's no way to kind of confirm that this multiverse, whoever's multiverse theory exists. However, with quantum computing, the way a quantum computer works is theoretically it's able to work so much faster because it's able to leverage the combined power of multiple realities, like across the full span of it, instead of just the computing resources within our reality. So who knows? Let's see. So Jalay Jalal's writing, this skill supports FBI memo 6751 dated 1945 round robin Brahmanical treatise says that the plane's frequency levels are nested, interpenetrating, and commingling, but succinct and organized. Yeah, we're surrounded by worlds. We just don't perceive them. As many as 10 to one end of the spectrum and 10 on the other end of the spectrum at every single level. Yeah, I'm not sure what that technically means, but um, yeah, like we do not perceive the full nature of reality. And here's again, I'm getting into like crazy town a little bit here, but even in near death experiences, which I'm starting to study, there are instances where people kind of have an audit of their life. And apparently people can ask, well, what if I did this differently? And they're able to view like how those events played out if they had shifted their had changed their decision. So imagine if Hugh Everett's multi many worlds theory is correct. It could be that there's maybe one consciousness, right, outside of us, and it's limited to each version of us, but it could just be the same consciousness across many different, every possible decision. And during those kind of life reviews, you're just leveraging that information, right? Again, I'm just trying to like I'm grasping at straws, trying to pull different things that people have reported experiencing, but maybe there's something to that. Okay, so I'm cold said it said every atom time space is connected in the universe. I wonder if that would apply to other another universe. Yeah, maybe. Roger Claiborne is writing there must be multiple observation scales of decohesion. From all the quantum points to all the macro and beyond, time is relative to scale of view and point origin. Yep, attitude adjustment. And Solite US Expat is writing, and in life reviews, there have been cases where you enter that person's consciousness, the person you hurt, and feel exactly what they felt when you hurt them. Yep, that's definitely been reported as well. What else? Anybody have questions on it? I mean, the people even understand what else? I mean, I felt like I understood most of it, but I'm sure there's a few places where I was probably a little. It's kind of easier to understand when you don't have to kind of fully understand the math just yet, you know? So we will definitely see. All right. Hey, Nathaniel. Oh man. Woo! I got a story for you, buddy. I'll just call you afterwards because well, maybe I could tell it tonight. I don't know. I had a really weird day today. Like weird day. Um yeah, we are trying to wrap our monkey brains around it. So Roger Claiborne is writing. I heard about what you read about, and some inspired my own theories. Interesting. Yeah, we'll talk soon. All right, so NDEOBA experiencers have said they become lucid and aware that they were in the DNA spiral helix, saw the layout, and understood. They reported what was going on in the level they were in. Interesting. All right, so Fred wrote, we cannot confirm the multiverse, but the quantum computer results. Yeah, apparently that's one theory about how it works. Why it can work so much faster because you're just leveraging the combined, across multiple universes. So, oh man, I hope you all can't hear that whining in the background. Because if you can, I might have to declare a quick break and take care of it. But if you can, just let me know. Um. Anyway, yeah, a lot of weird stuff. And I bet you if we had kind of, I mean, the one thing I think is interesting is Hugh Everett, when his theories weren't kind of fully accepted by academia, he went to work for the government, particularly, specifically the defense establishment. That's kind of weird, right? I mean, maybe he was just calculating missile trajectories and things like that, or maybe he was punching holes into alternate realities and having things kind of come through like they did in The Mist, right? The Stephen King, uh, what's it called? The Stephen King novella, which that movie is one of like that movie. It's not my favorite, but it's up there. That like it's just I love that movie, and I particularly love the ending, which is super dark. It is a super dark ending, but let's see. Yep, Soulite USX. This is writing. I've been seeing 1111 a lot this week. I did a ritual with a black obsidian mirror to clear some negative energy. When I woke up to check my phone, 1111. ChatGPT suggested using reverse speech to see if the ritual worked, and I was shocked by my reversals that I found, which were 4 reversals in a 30-second clip. Say more. Explain what that means by reversal. Yeah, the CIA time machine. I can't remember what the name of that. If you watch my interview of Anjali, you'll like she provides what the code name of that experience. With the time machine thing. It's like Monarch or something. It's probably not Monarch, but it's something with it like an M, I think. Jalay Jalal's writing, I had an experience recently where I had a vision of an adjacent universe. Maybe we were in the same place at that moment. They had technology I was able to use to communicate with them. Interesting. Okay, so Soulite wrote, see if the ritual worked. I was okay, so we talked about yours, talked about that. I saw interesting things there I'd never seen or thought of before. Jalay Jalal's writing. Soulite US expat is writing, you afford speech, and when you play it back, you will have clear, grammatically correct messages. Reverse speech connects with the divine, the greater consciousness. Interesting. Interesting. Just yikes. Mm. Oh God. Roger's writing, I wake up at 3:33 a.m. a lot and 4:44 a.m., 123 and 12, 123. It's weird that my mind is obsessed with those time values. Fred says, have you looked at people taking DMT and seeing symbol? I tried remote viewing before sleeping, saw the target and some symbols on top. I have not yet. We'll get to dimethyltryptamine at some point. I just haven't spoken to anybody yet. Huh. I'm cold is writing. I've been seeing 1134 a lot. It's weird that it is on time too. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of palindromic sequences. So right now, I just looked at the time, 7:57. Like that's pretty standard. For me to see that once every any 10-minute spectrum is like a 10% chance. But I definitely see these palindromic sequences a lot more often. Um, so Solite USX packages, you have to find these messages through a lot of gibberish. I took all of David Oates' classes to learn reverse speech. Interesting. Astrologers say there is the top side of the natal chart and the reverse side of the natal chart, like a plate, top side and underside. Huh. Oh man. Yeah, I mean I had like a rush of synchronicities today that started with like a breakfast bill between me and my friend. It was 6633. Like everything seems to be a multiple of 11, right? So 6 and 3. Okay, so Solite US expat reversals found, seen it, Life's Fire, some R2 reversal 2 Holy Fire, summed it, and it must heal it. Seen a leaf, reverse speech speaks in metaphors. Interesting. Interesting. Cool personal stuff going on. What all happened? It's like a long. It's longer than 10 minutes. It's um just very weird. All right, I got most of it. If you could just repeat the part after, listen carefully. 86. Yeah, I don't even remember. Um, yeah. Well, I might as well. We got 10 minutes. I'll just go through this really quick. I was thinking. Okay, so U.S. Solite expat. I missed the first 26 minutes. I'll have to re-listen to the beginning of the show. I don't know how you all sat through that because I just felt like, oh my god, there's some stuff. There were some parts where it slowed down. All right, I'm going to be really quick. I'm just going to relate facts, and you can kind of figure it out. So, I had breakfast at this place with a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. I thought about my friend earlier in the week. He just had like a thought, and then he reached out to me and said he was going to be in town. Just a weird kind of synchronicity sort of thing. Um, yep, of course it's 11 p.m. Okay, so after the kind of breakfast, the bill was 6633. He had to go to like pick somebody up, but we were going to reconnect. I left that place, walked up a hill to just get away from people, basically. And I got to the top of this hill, and there was just a black chair sitting there, like waiting for me. I'm like, all right, I'll bite. So I go sit down in the chair and, just waiting for my friend to contact me so we can go and continue to talk. And after a few minutes, a hummingbird literally flies up to my face within inches. It was so close I could see its eyes. And it just hovers there for a little bit and moves to my right side and hovers for a little bit. And then I say something to it, and then it just kind of just starts off. And, that was kind of weird. So my friend finally contacts me, and then I just kind of go down the hill. I make a left, and immediately up on my left, it says psychic reader, which is like a place I didn't notice at first. I'm like, that's weird. So I don't do anything yet because I want to reconnect with my friend. I go down to a parking lot. I kind of walk down further down this hill, go to a parking lot. It's like a Safeway parking lot. I just stand there waiting. A guy in a Tesla rolls up, and I'm just standing there, and I could tell he's really uncomfortable that I was standing there because all these whack jobs are like keying Teslas and stuff like that. So he must have thought I was one of those whack jobs or whatever. But I just, ignored it. It had nothing to do with any of this. I just thought it was funny. Because all the people who were having their keys, like, you know, cars keyed and like burned and vandalized are all, at least where I live, they're all progressives. So it's just like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. Um, so I just kind of say a prayer, like, am I supposed to do something with this? Like, show me a sign. So shortly thereafter, I hear the call of a raven, like just a cawing. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of not good enough. That's not really convincing. So I go walk over to meet with my friend, and I start telling him about this. I'm like, should we go into this psychic reader or whatever? I don't know if it feels quite right. Soon this like raven flies right over my head, right? Which I'm like, all right, well, that's a sign for something. I don't quite know what to do with this. So I kind of resolve, I'm like, why don't you make the decision? I tell my friend. And he's like, well, we don't really have a lot of time, but let's just start walking over there. So we talk for a little bit, and we get to this place, and I'm like, it doesn't feel right. So he's like, all right, well, let's go walk up the hill. He looks down on this concrete slab, and it just says, he's like, oh, look, look at, did you see this? Did you see this? I'm like, no, what is it? There was a number on there. It said 4666. I'm like, oh, that might be a sign. So then we walk up the hill, the same hill I was talking about earlier, so I could show him this chair that's just sitting there. And he sees the chair, and then he notices something else I didn't notice, which on this hill, it was like a green hill, like everything was green with grass, except there was one flower that was directly in front of the black chair, like literally right in front of it. I'm like, that's kind of strange. So he looks up the flower, and it was a black mustard flower. It's like this yellow flower that generally gets proliferated this time of year. And on other hills, it was plenty of it, but on this particular hill, it was just this one place. So he looked it up. We confirmed it was a black mustard flower, and then kind of what it meant. And it meant like resilience, spiritual protection, something like that. Okay, so then I just kind of had a desire to just ask him, can you just look up this particular place? Let's just see what it says. And there were a bunch of like 5-star reviews that were basically, it felt like AI generated, and there were some 1-stars, and the 1-stars were basically like, I walked in, I've been to many psychics before, and this person wasn't getting anything right, and I sensed if I gave them more information, they would still give me vague answers and things like that. And then they also just said that this person, the person who was in there said she was told that she just had generally like negative energy, and to balance it, which wasn't a problem, but she could balance it if she got this particular crystal from Sedona, Arizona. But it just so happened that for $200, for the low price of $200, you could get it at this shop. And then I thought, yeah, I'm not. This is not right. Like, this is not. I should not be going into this place, because this place was in Lafayette, California, which is one of the most expensive zip codes on the planet. And this, for a particular place to maintain kind of a shingle in that kind of place, they have to be good at extracting money in different ways from people. So I just decided, nothing against this particular establishment, but I decided the purpose of all these synchronicities was to put me in a position to understand that I need other people sometimes to help me interpret some of the things that I'm seeing. And that was the whole point. Anyway, we kind of decide to go to this place called the Lafayette Reservoir, right? Because he's just like, oh, he's got to go, like he's got to go back to Southern California. But do you want me to drive you anywhere? I'm like, is there a place that's quiet with some shade? And he's just like, yeah, Lafayette Reservoir. So then I had been texting earlier with my wife. I looked down at my screen, and she just had written, like, if you need a place to, because you're going to go someplace else, Lafayette Reservoir is close by. So independently, before he even suggested it, before I looked at it, she also said Lafayette Reservoir, which is also weird. So I go to the Lafayette Reservoir. I get out. I kind of just go up this hill, walk a little bit, sit down, and this lizard just walks up right up to my feet and just sits there, just randomly. I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. So then my wife finally calls. Um, she's just like, "Where are you going to be?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm on the hill. I'll come down and see you." So I come down and there's this big parking lot. So I don't really know where to go. And again, this huge raven flies across the parking lot, lands at a sign about 150 feet in front of me, facing me. And I'm like, my wife is here. And within a minute, I looked and there's her car driving toward me. So then we get home, and my like son's kind of waiting outside for us to get home. And as they're going inside, this blue butterfly kind of comes out of nowhere and spirals around me and then just shifts out. So, what does any of that mean? I have no freaking idea. None whatsoever. But that was my day today. I got some video and stuff like that. I was thinking about putting together something, but I don't know. I just told it here. So maybe not. Maybe I don't do that. Anyway, let's see what the folks have to say. But I'm glad I did that because that burned up most of the time I have remaining. Let's see. Um, okay. Yeah, I love hummingbirds. Yeah, they yeah, say drone hummingbird. Yeah, I doubt it. I doubt the NSA is interested in me. So like US expat is running. I use reverse speech to see if I should get a tattoo, which I've always thought about doing, and because of what I've been going through, it said the tattoo was part of my spiritual awakening. I will. The tattoo will stay on the elemental life that will be matrixed into the helix spiral, Jalal is saying, long after your physical body is gone. Okay, so Soul Light is writing, get a tribal phoenix tattoo when I have the money on my left upper arm, which connects with the heart, a reflection of my spiritual journey and rebirth. All right, so Peaches Scream 86 is the agent from Get Smart. Okay. Okay, so Gillet, Jalal, Wild the Radish, Mustard, Lupin, Buttercups are all very prolific in this area. Yep. Yep, and it's prolific on all the other hills, but just not this one. All right, so the two most significant reversals, so late US Expat is writing, I found when I asked if I should get a Phoenix tattoo are lamb must skin, go bash the fire crumb. All right, so, okay. Intelligence gathers psychics. I wonder if some of them are intelligence employees gathering community info and doing psyops on customers. Oh, interesting. I didn't think about that. That's a good point, Roger. I have nature magnetics. What does that mean? Nature magnetics. Yep. Yeah, it's probably particularly that's a good point. That would explain why she's able to persist in a very expensive area because intelligence on, people who are in the tech industry could be very valuable. How you doing, Johnny Topside? Good to see you, man. Howdy, howdy. Magnetic momentum. All right, I think that's about all she wrote tonight. So thank you for watching. I hope I learned something tonight. I hope you all learned something as well. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much, Jalay Jalal, for the $10. I appreciate it. And y'all have a great night and a wonderful week. God bless.